Are you having a hard time figuring out what to get Dad for Father's Day? You should check out Row 1 Brand's Vintage Pictorum Gallery. They have America's best sports art. With over 7,200 historic sports prints, you're assured to find something unique for Dad this Father's Day. Instead of a boring old tie, get him a historic baseball photo taken by Henry High Sandham at the historic Polo Grounds Stadium in New York City during the 1894 Temple Cup. Or, if he's an NFL buff, check out the 1963 vintage NFL poster. These are so good looking that you'll be amazed how they turn out. Shop now at sportshistorynetwork.com/row1 and save 15% off your order.
The jersey number 26 has some great players that wore it in NFL history. And today, we have an expert to help us pick a top 10 best players in NFL history that wore number 26. Chris Willis of NFL Films joins us in just a moment. This is the Pigskin Daily History Dispatch, a podcast that covers the anniversaries of American football events throughout history on a day-to-day basis. This is your host, Darren Hayes, and we're podcasting from the Pigpen on America's North Shore, bringing you the memories of the gridiron one day at a time. So with Gene and Mike Monroe, as well as Jason Neff supplying us with the great tunes, let's go no huddle through today's top stories of American football history.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Hello, my football friends. This is Darren Hayes of PigskinDispatch.com, and welcome to another special bonus edition of the Pig Pen on the Pigskin Daily History Dispatch podcast. This episode of the Football by Numbers is focused on the best NFL players that ever wore the number 26 in the NFL. This is a number with some big names attached to it in NFL history. But I'm quite fortunate tonight because I have an expert to join me in this endeavor, and he is no stranger to studying topics about the NFL. Yes, we are joined by Chris Willis, an accomplished author with multiple books on NFL subjects, such as Red Grange, Joe Carr, Dutch Clark, just to name a few. And did I mention he has maybe one of the best jobs ever, as he is the head of NFL Films Research Library. As a matter of fact, with NFL Films, he has been nominated for a couple Emmys and even won the award for his work on the 2016 season's Hard Knocks program on the Houston Texans. Chris Willis, welcome to the Pigpen.
It's nice to be here. So thanks for having me on. I'm excited about talk about some football history with you.
Oh, we're excited to talk about too with the number 26s. We have a tough job tonight, but before we get to that, I'd like to just talk to you a little bit about your job, because it is very interesting to me, and I'm sure to the listeners. It just makes our ears perk up for football fans. Are you able to share with us what a normal day looks like as being the head of the NFL Research Library for NFL Films?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I started in 1996, so it's been 25 years with NFL Films, and my mainly day-to-day chores are just helping the producers find the research for their projects. So, whether it's a documentary or a short piece, whatever material they need, whether it's footage, we do have a print library, books, magazine, so can't find everything online. So, we have a print library. So anything they need to get started on their shows, they come to the library, they come to me, and, I sort of get them started or steered towards what they need and stuff. So, and then every once in a while, like Hard Knocks, I'll be assigned to work on the show. I don't edit a lot, I usually just do a lot of research and handle the research library. But every once in a while with some of our other shows, I sort of pitch in, and Hard Knocks is always a fun show to work on. It's a grind. It's 5 weeks, it's nonstop footage. It's every day, but it's a fun show to be a part of. So that's mainly my day-to-day chores, at NFL Films.
I'm sure the Hard Knocks has got to be some long hours during those 5 weeks also.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I'm not up as much as our senior producers and our obviously our directors who are on site, who usually shoot, almost 20-hour days, 18 to 20-hour days. But it is a grind. But like I said, it's such a good show to work on, and a lot of people love it. People love that behind the scenes type of look and feel. So it's an honor to work on that show.
And it's a great show to watch too. It's very enjoyable. Now being at NFL Films for 25 years, you were able to work with the folks that put the NFL Films on the map in Mr. Ed and Steve Sable. What an amazing time. And it had to be very educational for you working with those two.
Absolutely. I started right when Ed was retiring. So I didn't have as much experience with Ed. He would visit every once in a while and come back in the building. So I had a lot more interaction with Steve. Steve was great to work with. He was awesome. You think he's the president, and but he was always around. His door was always open. It was never locked or shut, or you never saw him in the hallway. Like if you had a football question, a filmmaking question, anything like that, he was always around to help you out. And so it was a tremendous privilege to have him in that building and to bounce ideas off of. He would stop by the library and say, he would always ask, "Hey, do you need something, Chris?" He was always looking to make your job better. I saw him do it with the producers, and he did it with me. He said, "Hey, what do you need? What's going to make your life and your job, better?" Because he was all about making the best football films, filmmaking and making the best football film. He lived for that, so he wasn't like just a figurehead or pop up on TV. He loved filmmaking and just talking film. So yeah, it was a privilege to be around him until he passed away, to experience that and learn from him.
It sounds like he must be as genuine as he was portrayed on television that we watch as he is in person then, because he seemed like he was pretty high energy and very passionate about the game.
Oh, absolutely. That was who he was. And that came across. And like I said, he cared about you, whether you're, whether you're running the research library, whether you were a 40-year veteran, or whether you were working on Hard Knocks, or whether you were just doing a small little banquet piece that 50 people were going to watch at a banquet. He was there for you, and he'd help you, make everything better, because he knew what you were doing was representing NFL Films, and he wanted NFL Films to be first class. And, so what you saw on TV, what you saw as a genuine person, that's who he was in day to day.
Well, they started a great thing, and you folks there today are continuing the great legacy, because you have a great thing going there at NFL Films, and we really appreciate the work you do. We have a real tall task tonight, so we better get started here, as we have the most substantial players in the NFL's 100-plus years of history that wore the number 26 on their backs. And our challenge is to come up with a top 10 that we can agree on for the best of the best that wore that jersey number. Are you up for that challenge tonight, Chris?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like I said, it is a deep list, but I'm up for it.
Okay. Now, generally where we start off is the Pro Football Hall of Fame sort of gives us a leg up in our discussion, as they've identified 6 enshrined players that wore the number 26 at some point during their pro careers. And the Pro Football Hall of Fame says that Herb Adderley, Patty Driscoll, Benny Friedman, Paul Krause, Ty Law, and Rod Woodson all wore the number. Now, there's a little bit of controversy there, because in my research, Patty Driscoll, I could not find him wearing the number 26. And I went to my friend, and I'm sure you know him, Joe Ziemba, who is like all things Chicago football, especially the Cardinals. And, Patty Driscoll played for both the Cardinals and the Bears. And Joe Ziemba went through all his game programs that he owns and all the books he has, and he could not find Patty Driscoll in the number 26 in the NFL either. And I don't know what you found in your research.
No, if it was just for like one game. I don't, he wouldn't be he's not on my top 10. So,
okay.
If he wore it for more than a season, then yeah, Driscoll was one of the best triple threats, two-way players of his era. But if he only wore it for one game or maybe two, then that doesn't make the top 10.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Okay, so we really got 5 of those that we're going to really focus in on, I'm sure then. If maybe that's a good place to start, is to start with our Hall of Famers and just, present them and tell a little bit about them, if you don't mind. Yeah, no,
it's a good list. But like Driscoll, I think Friedman falls in that same category. Friedman's great too. Like I said, probably the first great, quarterback and passer, in NFL, a little bit before Sammy Ball, but Friedman only wore it 3 years too. And they were at the end of his career, with the Detroit Panthers, and he wasn't actually very good. His best years are with Cleveland Bulldogs and the New York Giants, where he was lighting it up. So I took that in consideration where, hey, you actually have to be as productive in the number 2, just because you wore it, so Driscoll, like Friedman, sort of fell short for me, because I think Friedman's best years, it's almost like Adrian Peterson. If you saw it, he wore 28, but he wore 26 the last 2 years, but they were decent years, but they weren't his production, wasn't his 2000 year. So I would lean towards them not making the cut. Obviously for me, I mean, they're number 1 and number 2 on my list is Herb Adderley and Rod Woodson, so there's no question. Right. I mean, I would put them at 1 and 2 for wearing the jersey number. So, if we're going to have 2 slam dunks, then those are probably your 2 slam dunks. For me, especially for Hall of Famers, you're going to start with that list. Now, Krause is an interesting one. I don't know how you feel about Paul Krause. He wore the number in his first 4 years with the Redskins. He did not wear it for the Vikings. Now he was super productive in those 4 years, right, with 28 picks. So he's borderline for me. I'll have to see how you feel about him, just because I think, as we get into some of these other names, especially the running backs and quarterbacks are very heavy with this number. He starts up there like, oh, I want to put him up. And then all of a sudden he starts sliding down, because I look at these other players and like, 4 years with the number, does that, I'll just throw a name out. We'll probably get to somebody like Raymond Claiborne. Well, he played 15 years, very productive. He's not a Hall of Famer, but, he's with the Patriots, 15 years wearing 26. I might put him ahead of Paul Krause. I know Krause is a Hall of Famer, and but 4 years is the 4 years production, because his better years were with the Vikings. He went with some Super Bowls. He was on a Super Bowl type of defense, and he affected that. So for me, I like I said, Krause kind of slides down as we get into some of these names.
But the only thing that I agree with you about Krause, but the only thing that's compelling about him is he was an All-Pro 3 times, but 2 of them were in those first 4 years with Washington, and he was wearing that number 26 there. So, so half his time of wearing the 26, if you look at it that way, he was an All-Pro. So, I mean, that's kind of interesting. And 2 of his 8 Pro Bowls, he was wearing a 26. So he indeed had 4 productive years with that number on. But like you say, you have people like, Claiborne wearing it for 15 years and some others that are wearing double-digit years that were that number their whole career. That makes an interesting discussion for sure. And I also definitely agree with you with Rod Woodson and Herb Adderley being automatically 1 and 2 on our list. But maybe before we get too far into the others, maybe we ought to just bring up some of the stats of Herb Adderley and Rod Woodson.
Yeah, I mean, Adderley obviously, is huge. 12 years he wore the number with the Packers and the Cowboys. 48 picks. He had 5 Pro Bowls. But for me, some, or at least the added bonus is, I do think you should help your team. So his, 6 titles or 7, like he won 1 Super Bowl with the 1 Super Bowl with the Cowboys, and then he wins, 5 championships and 2 Super Bowls with the Packers. I mean, he's a part of this great franchise, and that's very impressive to me, and the same thing with Woodson. I mean, Woodson, won a Super Bowl, 17 years, and he's got over 70 interceptions, 11 Pro Bowls, 6 All Pros. He was a member of the 75th and 100th anniversary team. So, or 75th anniversary. And then, so you can't be any better than that,
right.
And he had a lot of the interception returns for touchdown. He was part of a really good Steelers defense. He was part of really good, Ravens defense, later in his career. So, so those 2, they're so special, special players, Woodson could actually return kicks too, especially early in his career. He was a really good returner, kick returner. So, so those 2 players, and they played the position as well as anybody. I mean, they were technicians. You couldn't catch the ball on them. They would never be out of position. And things like that. When you watch them play, and you watch them on film, like, there's a lot of things they didn't do wrong. They were always in the right spot. Their technique was always great. So it was. They're two tremendous players. I mean, like I said, when you think of just quarterbacks in general, let alone wearing a number 26, they're up there as top. Five. You can even put them in the top 5, top 8 of all time. Cornerbacks and stuff. So and Woodson actually played a little safety later in his career. So tremendous, even just all around player and stuff. So that's why when we started this number, those are like your 2 slam dunks. Okay, Adderley, Woodson. Now my bottom 8. Now the next 8. Now we get a little bit into, like you said, people might have Krause up. Oh, there's I don't know. Like I said, I'm not even sure Krause makes my top 10. So, but those two were definitely, by far head and shoulders above everybody else.
I totally agree. And one added note, I'm from Western Pennsylvania and a Steelers fan. So Rod Woodson had one of the greatest restaurants ever when he was in Pittsburgh. And I was, we were sad to see Rod when he left and went to some other teams in the NFL, especially to the rival Ravens, eventually. But his restaurant leaving, that was a big tragedy too, because that was quite the hot spot in Station Square to go to before games. Great food there and some great adult beverages, as we'll say. Okay, well, like you said, we're going to get into some interesting waters now. Those two are definitely in. Now we've got 8 more to select from, and we've got a whole bunch of defensive backs and running backs that we're going to have to scan through here and try to figure out who comes up next in the tops. Now, I was thinking maybe we should talk about them as position groups to go through them and maybe check off some people that, okay, they're still in contention, or maybe this person's off, and then go through the other position group and then try to, collaborate on coming up with those other 8 positions. Does that sound fair enough?
Yeah, that's fine. Sounds good.
Okay. You want to go with the defensive backs first?
Yeah. I think they're a smaller group than the running backs, but still, but I like the names. Yeah. So, I think the only safety, that I had in the equation, I think there's a couple. It's George Sames, who I think's a little underrated. Sort of gets lost. But 10 years with the Bills, he was part of those 2 AFL championship teams in '63 and '64. Then he played for the Broncos his last 3 years. 22 interceptions. He had 5 Pro Bowls. 3 AFL All-Stars, and to be a part of a 2-time sort of AFL champion, I think he was, like I said, he's the only safety that I might put in the equation. Obviously there's guys like Chuck Cecil, Dick Geron, who played a little bit, or wore 26. We're decent players, but Sames, like I said, when you combine some of his All-Stars and his Pro Bowls, 5 Pro Bowls, and then he also helped the Bills win 2 championships. I think he makes the list as the safety. And then the cornerbacks, then there's 2 cornerbacks I thought that stood out above the rest. There was like Michael Downs was one player that I looked at, but he had no Pro Bowls, so I thought, wow, that's very odd. The guy played, very good for the Cowboys in those years especially in the 80s, had a lot of interceptions, almost 10 years with the Cowboys, but he didn't have any Pro Bowls. He wasn't elite, to where, to me, Antoine Winfield, who played 14 years as a corner, and Raymond Claiborne, who we mentioned a little bit earlier, played 15 years, mostly with the Patriots in his last 2 years in 90 and 91 with the Browns. He's 15 years, he's 36 interceptions. He has 3 Pro Bowls and 1 Super Bowl appearance. And Winfield was similar, 25 interceptions, had 3 Pro Bowls. So, like I said, they're definitely a notch below Adderley and Woodson, but you're talking about 2. Both of them almost played 15. Claiborne played 15 and Winfield played 14. They were physical players. They played good in the run and in the pass game. Winfield was only like 5'9", 180 pounds, and he was really good in the run game. He could play the pass game as well as anybody. He could play man. He could play zone. And Claiborne was a very good, cornerback, throughout the 70s and the entire 80s. So to me, they're very similar. As we get into the running backs are really similar. It's going to be tough to separate. But to me, Claiborne and Winfield were same as a safety. Claiborne and Winfield as cornerbacks were ahead of guys like Michael Downs, Casey Hayward, who's a current player. Dick Duran was a safety. I think even Ray Rhodes wore number 26. And if Monday Night Football, Louis Riddick wore number 26, but their careers weren't quite at the level as Claiborne and Winfield, although they're named, people know Rhodes as a coach and Riddick as an announcer and as a scout, but to me, Claiborne, so, like I said, Adderley and Woodson are up there, the same as a safety, head and shoulders. And then you have Winfield and Claiborne, sort of that sort of next level, worthy of top 10.
No, I don't disagree with you there. Now, just to mention, we said earlier about Ty Law. Ty Law only wore the number 26 for one season in 2009, and I think he was with he wasn't even with New England when he wore that. He wore it with the Denver Broncos. So I think he's probably, even though he had some great numbers too as a defensive back. So if there's listeners out there say, hey, well, you said Ty Law. Well, that's probably one of the criteria, only wearing it for one season, that maybe doesn't put him on that list with guys like Claiborne and Winfield. Did you agree?
Absolutely, yeah. No, that's why I forgot he was in that modern. I was focusing on the two-way players with Driscoll and Friedman, but Law was the same way. Like I would put Krause just ahead of Law, because Krause, like I said, was 4 years, and he had some of his more better individual years. He didn't have the Super Bowl success, or at least getting to the Super Bowl. But Law, yeah, I mean, Law is a great player, but as 26, like I said, to me, Claiborne and Winfield, for their longevity and the way they played, was much more than Law. So Law would not make the cut either.
They were a much more substantial number 26 than Law was in his 1 year, or Krause in his 4 years. I agree with that. Mm-hmm. Okay. Is there any other DBs that you want to like to bring up?
I don't think so.
I had some names like, Van McElroy, who had 9 seasons wearing number 26 with the Raiders. His numbers, he had 111 games, 31 interceptions, 1 touchdown. You talked about Sames. Benny McRae were the number 26 for 10 seasons with the Bears and 1 with the Giants. 133 games, 27 interceptions, 4 touchdowns. They're just some numbers to throw out there. I'm not sure that they make the list, but definitely they were substantial players that wore the number 26. Just like Michael Downs, and I think you said, did you mention Charles Romes also?
I mentioned Chuck Cecil. I didn't mention Romes. No. So,
okay. Charles Romes.
I mentioned Casey Hayward's a modern guy wearing 26.
Okay, but Romes is Romes is another one. Worked for 10 seasons with Buffalo. 156 games, 28 picks, and a score. So they're all about the same type of statistics. Same amount of those 3 gentlemen I just talked about. But not sure that they make the list. They definitely don't surpass Winfield or Claiborne with what they did. I don't think.
Yeah, no, they were always a little less on the list as I was going through it. Yeah. Okay.
Well, I guess it's time to get into this running back horde we have here, because there are some good running backs in here, and it's going to be, I think, some tough decisions here to make. And some of them, their numbers kind of surprised me. I don't know if the same happened for you.
Yeah, I mean, for me, when I looked at the running backs, the list kept increasing and increasing. I'll talk about the guys who I thought. I mean, there's 3 guys that came up very short, so I'll mention them. One's a modern guy who maybe 5 years from now, if we do this again, he's up on this list. But Saquon Barkley, it's just like I said, just not enough of a career yet to know. But I would assume maybe he's in that discussion. And like I said, Adrian Peterson only wore it, I think, the last 2 years. So they come up short. A guy who I like I said, when I first saw, some of the players that wore, especially from the running back, I'm like, oh, but he was very limited. I think it's only like 4 years in the NFL, really, was Lionel Little Train James, with the Chargers, very explosive, unique player, but he didn't do it for as long as I thought. I was like, wow. And it was really like 2 monster years. He had some of the kick returns too. And So I liked him, but I was like, whoa, he comes up way short when you start mentioning some of these other names. And the other one, who we go back to the 50s, is John Arnett, of the Rams and stuff, Jaguar Arnett. So his stats are really good. He's 7 years. He had over 2,800 yards rushing, 4,800 yards from scrimmage, 36 total touchdowns, 5 Pro Bowls, and then the 1 All-Pro. And then he did some kick returns too and stuff. But was never, like I said, was a very good player at the time. But with some of these other names, just like with Krause, he started just getting bumped down a little bit. For me, there's 2 names that stood out. I'll talk about them initially, who I really like. Obviously, Clint Portis, a 9-year career, over 9,000 yards rushing, 11,941 yards from scrimmage, including receiving, 80 total touchdowns. He was Offensive Rookie of the Year, 2 Pro Bowls. Helped 2 franchises, along the way. Was very good with the Broncos, and very good with the Redskins. So I think he stood out a little bit better, especially when you talk about, Le'Veon Bell and maybe Deuce McAllister, who was similar era. Portis to me was a little bit above them. And for me, just because I think his versatility, and he did it for 2 teams, his numbers maybe, they're not bad, but to me, Wendell Tyler was tremendous, was a tremendous player with the Rams, who went to the Super Bowl, and then did it with the Rams in the Super Bowl, and then did it with the Niners, especially the 84 team. He was very dynamic, both in the run and the pass game. That's why Walsh liked him a lot, is that he could use him in the pass game too. He fumbled a little bit, but he made up, and he was one of the most unselfish players, like, especially when they brought him in. They also drafted Roger Craig, and they played Craig at fullback, and they played Tyler at halfback, but they were somewhat interchangeable at times, like with Craig. So Tyler, at that point, you didn't have a lot of halfbacks blocking for the fullback, but in Walsh's system, they would go out for passes, they would block for each other, and stuff. And Tyler would do it, and he was very unselfish. His 10 years, he only made 1 Pro Bowl, but over 6,300 yards rushing, 8,100 yards when you count his receiving, 66 touchdowns. That's a lot of touchdowns for a guy who played for just 10 years is still a long time, but near the end of the career, he got beat up a little bit, in 85 innings. And so those 66 touchdowns came in like 8 years, or even his rookie year was it. So I liked Portis.
That number surprised me with how many touchdowns he had. I didn't expect, I knew he was a great back. I didn't realize he had quite so substantial yardage and touchdowns. That kind of shocked me.
You look at Le'Veon Bell. Bell's great. Bell's, over 6,400 yards rushing. He's almost over 9,000 yards, but he's only got 48 touchdowns. He's got the 3 Pro Bowls and obviously the 2 All Pros, and he's a great, dual threat, out of the backfield. He can catch and run, but when you look at it, he's only got 48 touchdowns. And Wendell Tyler had 66. And they're approaching about the same amount of years now. So. So I think Wendell Tyler, wearing number 20, like I said, he was very good at the Rams. He was very good with 2 teams. It wasn't just 1 team. He was very good 2 teams. I like Portis and Tyler. They're sort of slam dunks for me. And even Le'Veon Bell. He's the next on my list. Definitely very versatile. Was a dynamic player there for a couple of years. He's kind of slowed down now. Missing that year. I think really killed his momentum of being, a borderline Hall of Fame guy if he kept it up and stuff. So, he's versatile, like I said. If he's close to over 9,000 yards total, but for 48 touchdowns, and the 3 Pro Bowls and the 2 All Pros, was a very good, so he makes my top 10. And then we get into a couple more names. If you want to hear these names, now these guys are like I said, they're all similar guys. I had a very hard time separating them. You had Lydell Mitchell, who played for 8 years. He had 6,500 yards rushing with 30 touchdowns, over 9,700 yards if you include receiving, and 47 total touchdowns, and he made 3 Pro Bowls. And he elevated that Colts team. That Colts team was somewhat competitive in the 70s, with Burt Jones. Roger Carr. So he did help the team a little bit. Then you had Robert Smith, who's 7 years, who retired kind of early. He was 6,400 yards rushing, 30 touchdowns, only 7,536. So he wasn't as involved in the pass game as maybe like Bell and Tyler were. 2 Pro Bowls. And then Deuce McAllister for me, 8 years, over 6,000 yards rushing, 49 touchdowns, and then 7,800 if you count his receiving yards, and 54 total touchdowns. 2 Pro Bowls, and help elevate that team in the 2000s, to be a little bit more competitive. So those 3, like I said, when I started adding the quarterbacks and George Sames was my one safety, all of a sudden I got a little bit of jumble here with I think Bell makes my top 10, but then Mitchell, Smith, and McAllister, if you take some of the guys I've mentioned, I think that's 11 names. So somebody's definitely coming off. I think Bell and Mitchell for me are on the list. So then it comes down to Robert Smith or Deuce McAllister. So I don't know how you feel about some of these guys.
Well, a couple observations. I was surprised how Le'Veon Bell so far in his career is almost identical in statistics to Lydell Mitchell. That kind of surprised me. The big difference was, Mitchell having more touchdowns receiving than Le'Veon Bell. I would have thought that would have been the other way,
Yeah.
And, and also the rushing, Lydell Mitchell had 10 less rushing touchdowns than Le'Veon Bell has so far. But if you look at the end of their stats, Mitchell has 47 total touchdowns, Bell has 48 touchdowns. Mm-hmm. They both have, just over 9,700 yards of total offense. So they're a very similar player up to this point in their Bell's career compared to Mitchell's entire piece of work here. So those 2 are the ones I'm teetering on. But like you say, if you look at what Smith did in his 7 seasons, it's pretty dramatic. 4.8 yards per rush, 44 touchdowns, a year less than what we're looking at Bell and even Mitchell. And he's right there with them in touchdowns, and just about 1,500 behind in total offense. Boy, it is a tough one. And the same thing with McAllister. He was more heavy on the rushing portion of his yardage and his touchdowns. That's where most of those came. Wasn't as productive in the passing as the other ones were. But there's another name worth mentioning. I don't think he's to the caliber of what we've just been talking about, but Preston Pearson came up on my list, at least to be under consideration, because he wore the number for 14 seasons, played with multiple teams, including the Steelers and most famously with Dallas. And he's another one. He was pretty much a backup running back on all those teams. It was behind Dorsett, was behind Franco Harris, and but still had some productive numbers to, a total of 30 touchdowns, 6,700 yards. But I don't think he makes that list of 10. So let's go. Okay. So you're at 11. I'm probably right in that same ballpark with like the same names, but let's go for sure. Our ones that we're in, we're saying Woodson and Adderley are definitely in. And we both agree that George Sains should be in the third spot. And I think we're both in agreement that Claiborne and Winfield should both be in. Correct?
Yeah.
So that takes us to 5. Now we got those other 5 names to come up, and it's basically these running backs, or maybe one of the DBs comes up into it. I'm sorry, Clinton Portis is another one that I think we both agree on.
Yeah. And Tyler, did you want Tyler?
Oh yeah, and Wendell Tyler. Yes.
So that's okay. 1, 2, 3, 4,
7
5,
is what I have.
6. So So to me, those 7 were clearly. Those were kind of like my 7.
Okay.
And then Bell was 8. So
okay. I agree with that.
Okay.
I agree with that.
Yeah. So then it comes down to me, Mitchell, Smith, and McAllister. So I would say Mitchell is my 9th. Like you said, I agree with him. I think his number surprised me. I think he was a very good player, and did a little bit more overall than you think. Like you said, he's similar to Le'Veon Bell, and most people who probably follow the modern game think Bell is great. Like, oh wow, he could do everything. Well, Mitchell was a similar player just 20 years earlier, or 25 years earlier. So Mitchell will probably be my 8. So it comes down to what, Smith and McAllister.
And possibly Kraus.
Kraus. Yeah. So to me, Kraus comes up short. That's why I said he kept going down. He kept coming down. So unless you like Kraus better than Smith or McAllister, maybe I'll leave that up to you. So because I could go either way. I could have went either way with Smith or McAllister. I think my gut's saying, like you said, because I think if Robert Smith didn't retire early, because I think he was healthy enough. He had a very good year his last year. I think he ran over 1,500 yards his last year. And my gut says if he even plays 2 more years, he could literally run for 10,000 yards. He was already at 7,500. So, or at least 9, like he's up there with Portis, and he's more of a slam dunk. Then he might be closer to 50 touchdowns too. And that's much more impressive than maybe what McAllister or Mitchell did. So,
I agree with you. I think it should probably be Smith because just what he did in his body of work in those 7 years is tremendous. 4.8 yards per rush. That's pretty substantial, I would say.
Yeah.
Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, I have 9 names down, so I'm missing somebody so let me go through them again. Woodson, Adderley, Portis, Mitchell, Le'Veon Bell, Wendell Tyler, Robert Smith, Antoine Winfield, and George Sains.
Yeah.
So
Claiborne's the only one you're missing.
Claiborne, okay, that's who I'm missing. Okay, thank you. Okay, well, I think we did it. I think that's our 10 best that as of right now in NFL history that wore the number 26 that were for some period of time. We had some good criteria there and a great discussion. That was fun.
No, I liked it. That's when you invited me and you said and you gave me a couple and I thought 26 would be very fun to debate. So I was glad that we got a good number that had some names like that. Because like I said, there's some names that I kind of forget, like like Wendell Tyler or that are not Hall of Famers, like Wendell Tyler, Lido Mitchell. To me, and Raymond Claiborne, like a few guys that stood out. Like, hey, these are really good players that happen to wear 26. That there might not be Hall of Famers, they might not ever make the Hall of Fame. But they're really good They're really good football players. Like I would want Wendell Tyler on my football team, or Lido Mitchell. They were good football players that you would want on your team. So absolutely.
Yeah. Well, before I let you go, and I appreciate you helping us out in that endeavor with these number 26s. But you are, you have quite a few books out there right now. Matter of fact, I just told you before we came on, I'm getting ready to read your Red Grange book, which looks fantastic. What do you have going on right now? Do you have any projects coming up or any books that we can look forward to?
Actually, I do.
Okay.
Excuse me. It's along those same lines as Red Grange. If you like, especially the 30s, and especially Chicago Bears. I'm working with the Nagurski family, so I'm writing a book on Bronco Nagurski and his life. So they liked what I did with Grange and sort of wanted that sort of same type of treatment. So I was like, he's an interesting guy. Not only with the NFL, he was a world champion wrestler too in the 30s. I mean, he actually quit the NFL to do wrestling. He could make more money wrestling, in 1937, 38. So he went into wrestling, and he actually came back for one more year during World War II to play, which is an interesting thing. So I'm sort of back in with the Bears a little bit, that history and Broncos life and stuff. So it's been really good. So as of now, I'm actually starting the writing process here in March. My deadline's in October, so we should see it sometime in like the fall, around training camp of 2022. Next year. So if you like Grange, if you like Dutch Clark, it's probably going to be similar to that type of story. With definitely a really interesting, a guy in Bronco Nagurski.
Yeah, that definitely sounds. I mean, there's a lot of connections because Grange and Nagurski were teammates for some period of time too with the Bears.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. A couple of years there, where they won championships. They won championships in 32 and 33, and then the sneaker game in 34, which they could have won, but they lost with the switching of the cleats to sneakers. So
yeah, that's one of the great stories in NFL history right there.
Yeah. Never gets old.
Yeah, that's for sure. Now, how about, I mentioned a few of your books at the start, and we just talked about a few here. I know you have a plethora of other ones. If you want to plug some of those too for the listeners.
Yeah, I mean, I like all my projects, but, like the Red Grange one that came out in 2019 when the NFL celebrated its 100th year was a very interesting project. So I recommend that one. It's a little in depth, it's over 400 pages, but it tells the story of sort of the NFL's first superstar. One of the other big favorites of mine is one of Joe Carr in the NFL in the 1920s and 30s. I think people don't realize how influential he was. When the league got started in 1920, they elected Jim Thorpe as the president, but he was mainly just a figurehead. He was an athlete. He wasn't an administrator. Well, Joe Carr from 1921 to 1939, before he passed away, he almost 20 years, he's the one that sort of laid the foundation, with contracts, territorial rights, the rule book, actually, as much as I love NFL films, well, he actually did an NFL instructional video in 1938, where they said, this is what the NFL's, this was 30 years before NFL Films was founded, and they did an instructional video. He did the first record and fact book, so he sort of does these things that the NFL sort of leans on now, sort of the building blocks. So that project was very interesting to do. So like I said, that's one of my all-time favorites, so like the Grange and the Carr and the Dutch Clark book, if you're interested in that type of era players, I sort of relate it to some people. If you're a baseball fan, these are names like Ty Cobb and Babe Ruth, and Lou Gehrig and Christy Mathewson. Like, if you know baseball history, or even if you don't, the names of Ty Cobb and Babe Ruth. Well, Dutch Clark and Joe Carr and Red Grange, these are similar people in the NFL. And so if you're looking to learn about that type of history, I think these books sort of provide that. And that's why I like doing them. They sort of preserve that history for future generations. As much as I love the game now, I love watching NFL on Sundays. I love reading about Joe Montana and, Jim Brown and, Tom Brady and Peyton Manning. But some of these old sort of pioneers, they deserve their sort of stories being told too. So that's why I like sort of grabbing them, just because not people, I would say, but some people don't know them quite as well as some of the modern players, and they deserve sort of that recognition.
I agree with you. That's sort of a magical time. And, you had almost everybody was a two-way player. So you had to be good on offense and defense. You had linemen kicking field goals and drop kicks and, all kinds of crazy things, very little padding or equipment, safety wise, or rules to protect players as it is now. So, men were men playing football back in those eras of football.
Sure.
So it's very nostalgic and very interesting to a lot of people. And I'm sure you have a lot of people enjoying your book. So we got some great things to look forward to in the future with you. We got a lot of good reading to catch up on. For my part, sounds like a lot more books than I anticipated. I got to get in my library to read up on, because this is some great stuff. And Chris, we really appreciate it. Do you have any social media or anything you want to throw out there if anybody wants to follow you?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter. It's CD Willis 83. So if you go on Twitter, I post things about my projects, but I also post a lot of football history stuff. I wrote, and I also write for a website called Pro Football Journal. I'm assuming maybe some of your listeners know Pro Football Journal.
Absolutely.
.com. John Turney does a really good job with that. So I write some articles, especially when I have time. With life and work and family and everything else, I wish I had a little more time to even write as much as I do to contribute. But I know Turney does a really good job with that website, because it's all about history. It's not like there's enough websites to find the news of the day and the transactions and fantasy and stuff like that. But if you're looking for a little quick read here and there, so Pro Football Journal, so those type of things you could check out online or social media.
Okay. Well, once again, we appreciate you taking the time to spend with us for this episode. It was very interesting. You had some great detail and knowledge that you shared with us, and we really appreciate it. And we hope to have you on again real soon on the Pigskin Dispatch.
All right. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Peeking up at the clock, the time's running down. We're going to go into victory formation, take a knee, and let this baby run out. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you back tomorrow for the next podcast. We invite you to check out our website, pigskindispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. Pigskindispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. A special thanks to the talents of Mike and Jean Monroe, as well as Jason Neff for letting us use their music during our podcast.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
It was just another ordinary day in the offices of the Pittsburgh Guardian newspaper circa 1924. But for Marla Delft, assistant editor, everything was about to change. For she was about to discover the awesome attractiveness of Row 1 brand retro sports paraphernalia items thanks to Orville Mulligan, sports writer.
And there it is.
Wow, Orville, that's really the bee's knees.
Isn't it just? A poster-sized replica of the actual 1909 World Series program cover.
I can see that. But where did you get it? And where'd you get it framed?
I ordered it from the Row 1 website, where over 6,000 items of sports memorabilia from the 1880s to the 1990s are available for reproduction in multiple sizes and in several different materials, with over a dozen styles of frame to choose from for prints like this.
Well, I'm sure Mr. Delft would love to put up more of these in the office. But I'm equally as sure they're beyond this newspaper's budget.
Not at all, my dear Marla. See for yourself. Go to sportshistorynetwork.com/row1.
sportshistorynetwork.com/row1. Oh my, these are good prices. Oh, and look at this stuff. Oklahoma-Nebraska football, college basketball art, Michael Jordan items.
And so it
retro
was that
sports
Marla Delft
advertisement
discovered the
clapboard.
splendiferous magic of Row 1 sports memorabilia, arts, and prints. You can too by visiting sportshistorynetwork.com/row1. That's ROW1 today for access to the full Row 1 catalog of gallery prints and gifts like t-shirts, long-sleeve shirts, telephone cases, coffee mugs, blankets, pillows, towels, and even shower curtains. Act today for 15% discount off all prints with coupon code SHN15 and 20% off all other items with coupon code SHN20 at checkout. And keep your dial locked to the Sports History Network for the exciting chronicles of the 1920 sports world in Orville Mulligan, sports writer. Coming soon.
At the Sports History Network, we're all about sports yesteryear, and so we're so pleased to introduce you to Row 1, an online memorabilia gallery and shop that brings you sports history to life anywhere. The Row 1 gallery includes over 5,200 gorgeously reproduced prints of team posters, game program covers, game tickets, advertisements, and more in baseball, pro and college football, pro and college basketball, and more. And any gallery item may be printed in a variety of sizes on wood, metal, canvas, acrylic, or poster paper. And in Row 1 shop, check out the thousands more of unique items with the retro and historical designs dating back to 1876, including t-shirts, long-sleeve shirts, phone cases, mugs, blankets, pillows, towels, and even shower curtains. Go to sportshistorynetwork.com, ROW1, for access to the full Row 1 catalog and for gallery prints and gift items, plus get a 15% discount off all prints on the Row 1 Pictorum Gallery with coupon code SHN15. Follow the link on the show notes.